What up, MMA True Believers? I am Jason Burgos for Sherdog.com, and with me tonight is a fighter with something to prove. After a difficult loss in his UFC debut to one of the best young fighters in the bantamweight division in Cory Sandhagen, he returns to the fabled octagon at UFC San Antonio looking to notch his first win in the promotion at the expense of Jin Soo Son, and that man is Mario Bautista. Mario, thank you for giving me some time tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason, for having me on.
Now, tell me about your journey to MMA, because everybody's story in ways is similar but very, very different. Like, what was your life like growing up? Did you study martial arts at all? Did you maybe take up wrestling in school? Like how did you go about eventually making your way to become a mixed martial artist?
Well, when I was about like 13 or 14, I wanted to do boxing, and so I started training boxing for a little bit. I had a cousin that did USA boxing. And just where I'm from, there just wasn't, too much competition, so I couldn't really do any tournaments or anything like that. Got into high school, put on the singlet, started wrestling, and did 4 years of wrestling, and that was pretty much it. And afterwards, did some jiu-jitsu, and then 2 months later, I took my first fight.
Now, were you a big fan of mixed martial arts and say UFC, for example? Because some guys are, and some people are. Did you have like certain fighters or anything that you liked? Did you watch a lot of events growing up?
You know what? In the beginning, I just wasn't a fan of the UFC. It seemed like every time I was, watching it, it was heavyweights pushing each other up against the cage,
Yeah.
And then one time, my uncle just introduced me to Pride.
Ah.
And then I just fell in love right there and then I started watching MMA more and then understanding it's more than just than heavyweights just pushing each other up against the cage. It's actually very there's an art to it for sure.
And what's funny too, and I was just talking to Kevin Seiler a couple of nights ago. He's about to be in a Contender Series, and he said the same thing. He's from Bolivia, but he got into MMA from Pride too. What is it about Pride that made it? Was it just simply it had almost that kind of like pro wrestling-esque kind of entertainment factor that drew you to it more so than the UFC? Was it more interesting, fun, entertaining fighters? What made Pride so much more intriguing to so many people like yourself?
I think it's just the rawness. When I watched it, you couldn't hear the crowd. All they had microphones set up in the corners, like because you could hear everything.
Yeah.
And just the different rule set, I liked that rule set that they had. So that's what attracted me to Pride.
Now, and I'm glad you brought up rule set, because I've talked about it and debated it on the Sherdog podcast I do, and a lot of people have talked about over times with American mixed martial arts that sometimes a good old-fashioned yellow card would be interesting, and it's one of those elements that we don't see in American and mixed martial arts. In your career so far, would you be intrigued by an idea of a yellow card, or you don't like that idea, that the fact that a fighter could lose money because of a referee's decision, is it something you wouldn't like?
I wouldn't mind the yellow card, because it seems like once they pulled it out in Pride, they got right after.
Yeah.
You don't want to lose money, and you don't want to bore the fans either. Also the no elbow rule. Just so guys couldn't lay and pray. They have to get up, make space to punch, and it allows the guy on bottom, he's able to scramble up if he can. So.
Now, before we get into the finer details of the fight with Cory Sandhagen, I just wanted to talk about those other elements people mention when making a UFC debut, and you did so in just your 7th fight, which is impressive in of itself. I mean, in the lead up to the fight and the media related stuff, did it all that fight week stuff? Did it have any effect on you and your usual fight week preparation and your rhythm and all those kind of things? And I asked because I interviewed Morgan Fryer from the PFL. She made her PFL debut at PFL 4, and it was the biggest stage she had been on to that point, and it affected her. She said it affected her even the night before the fight. She really couldn't even sleep. Were you prepared for, or did finally having that UFC moment and all that stuff that comes with it, did it have some effect at all on you for your first fight?
I wouldn't say too much, because they do give you, a bunch of time throughout the day, to get your workouts in, do what you got to do. and the media stuff. It doesn't take too long. It didn't really affect my rhythm. I'm sure it affects some other people's, but
Mm.
with me, if anything, it just kept my mind, kind of off the fight. It was kind of short notice, so um, it just it was just a filler, I guess,
Mm.
throughout the day.
And they always talk about, once the fight starts, the UFC jitters, and that, finally being there in the cage, in the octagon, that can, have an effect. I mean, because you, of course, as a fighter, you'll do all these visualizations and everything and prepare for it mentally, but it can be different once you're finally out there, the cameras, the crowd, the octagon. What was your feelings when you first got in there into the cage? Were you excited? Did you finally feel maybe some nervous energy? What was the feeling like, the emotions like at that moment?
You know, I didn't really have the jitters. Everything just from the call to the fight, everything just happened so fast.
Mm-hmm.
It just um, and then I might have had like a little bit of jitters before walking out, but once you walk out there, you just get that rush, and
Mm-hmm.
I felt happy. I felt excited, and once I was in the cage, it just it's just another Saturday for me. I spar every Saturday, so
Mm-hmm.
in the cage, so it was just another day.
Going into the fight, did you see Cory Sandhagen as like the toughest test for you of your career up until that point?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We knew he's a like very skilled martial artist,
Mm-hmm.
and even on the regional scene, because we even fought on the same card a year to the date prior.
Hmm.
Um, so I seen him warm up, and we knew he was skilled, and we knew it was going to be, a tough fight.
Now, Sandhagen's stand up can be difficult to deal with. I mean, because he uses his length and his range well, but pushes a high pace at the same time, which is fascinating about him. But Daniel Cormier mentioned on the broadcast that you are an aggressive fighter, yet in this fight, you had to be very defensive, and he was pushing the pace and kind of pushing you on your back foot. Was his style hard to get a read on and deal with in that first round as it played out?
Yeah. It's his length. He uses it well in the cage. He seems a lot longer in the cage than he
Mm.
did outside, because he was only like 2 inches taller than me,
Mm-hmm.
but in the cage he felt a lot taller and a lot longer. And his feints, it was hard to get a read on his feints,
Mm.
and that was a difficult part trying to get in.
Now, what were the lessons you took from the fight? And you lost by submission, but what were like the lessons? Not just getting a taste of like that UFC level competition, but being in the cage, the long walkout, the cameras, the crowd, the fight week. What were some of the things that really you're taking into this fight that were very helpful from that first experience as in your UFC debut?
Honestly, the most I learned was from being in the cage with Cory, like feeling his energy, and just seeing how he was reacting to all this. He's a high level fighter, and to see that right in front of my face,
Mm-hmm.
um, I I try to take as much as I can from that, because
Mm.
um, I learned a lot from Cory just watching him right in front of me.
Now, in Jin Soo Son is in a similar boat as you. He also lost his debut to another very good fighter, Napina Yan. When scouting
Yeah.
him, what things do you like about this particular matchup for you, and where are some of the areas where you got to be kind of careful with him?
Um, he's definitely not Sandhagen as far as his stand up. So,
Okay.
um, you know, I think he's just a strong grappler. I don't know. I didn't really see too much of his jiu-jitsu, but he's just a tough guy. He's from Korean Zombies gym, so they have
Mm.
that mindset. Go forward. Take some shots. Just make it ugly. So that's what I see from him, and so that's what I'm just gonna try to avoid. Um, just try to pick him apart. Don't get into any slugfest with him. Don't try to get into his little antics that he does. Smiles when he gets hit.
Mm.
You know, don't go all crazy, and yeah.
It really differs from a lot of fighters. I was talking like Kevin Seiler. I was talking to him. He watches a lot of videotape. I've talked to other young fighters that they don't really like watching too much videotape. Even veteran fighters are so videotape. What's your opinion on watching video? Are you a big video watcher? Do you prefer to like leave it up to your coaches and they'll specifically give you the details and things and tendencies to look for? How does your process work going into a fight?
Yeah, I'll definitely watch some video on him, and then my coaches, my striking coach, and then we just come up with a game plan, and that's pretty much it. And then we'll set up my rounds, specifically for him and to the things he does, and work from there.
Now you mentioned that the Sandhagen fight was kind of short notice, and it came up, and it was just all so fast. So you didn't probably maybe have too much time to have to worry and settle and overthink things. But do you feel any pressure for this fight, the second fight, because obviously you don't want to get off to a back-to-back start with the company. It's always difficult. I mean, especially when you see things like John Lineker gets released or Jordan Rinaldi gets released after a fight. Are you feeling an added pressure, or are you not even letting that kind of stuff affect you? You're just going to take this one fight at a time and just worry about all that kind of outside stuff after the fact?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, to be honest, it does put a little bit of pressure on me and him too.
Yeah.
Yep. We're both coming off losses, so yeah, I would be lying if I said it didn't, put any more pressure on me. But I'm training good, and I'm prepared for this fight. So
how do you combat something like that? Feeling an added pressure, because it's important. Every fight, I get it. Every fight has pressure, and every fight has a nervousness to it. How do you deal with that kind of stuff? Is it just simply about keeping your mind busy? Is it visualization? Is it a sports therapist? What do you do to kind of not let the mental side of it affect you too much, so you can focus and kind of go into with a positive energy?
yeah, I try not to think about it too much. It'll cross my mind, but I just take it day by day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really, I'll have to like check the weeks to see how many more weeks I got, but I'll just take it day by day, do what I gotta do that specific day, and the next day it's another day, and more work to be done.
Now, you are officially a UFC veteran, but you also competed for some other notable promotions in your career, like, for example, LFA, Combate Americas. Tell me what makes those experiences unique, and where they also may fall short compared to, like, the big-time presentation and style of being a fighter on a UFC card. How does it differ in those ways?
As far as uniqueness, it's just they're all pretty much the same, to be honest. Even with the UFC, it's a cage, um, and then but I did have Combate did treat us pretty good during the week, and just the only benefit from the UFC is they send you out Tuesday, and you get to hang out all week basically and get ready there. You don't have to train here and then leave the day before weigh-ins, and kind of hurt the day before and whatnot.
Now let's switch gears. Talking about fighting, because I always like to end the conversations on just so learning about the fighter, so fans and people that are watching can also just learn about you. What are some things that you are into doing that have nothing at all to do with fighting? Like, do you have any personal hobbies? Do you like to paint? Maybe you like to cook. Maybe you're a stamp collector. What are some interesting things that maybe some fans might be like, wow, Mario's into that? Never would have knew.
You know what? To be honest, I'm probably just a boring guy, to be honest. Back in Nevada, I mean, it's different weather up there, so you can go, we have 4 seasons, go out during winter, an outside guy. But here, man, what is it, like, it's 103 degrees right now. So what am I going to do outside? Yeah. But, I'm just, right now, I'm a stay-at-home dad, to be honest. I'm just, the UFC, I was able to quit my job and just train, and then just go home, and I get to spend all day with my kid, and that's just pretty much it. That's every day, home with kid, come to training.
How old do you have? A boy or girl? How old are they? How much do they know that dad's a fighter and all those kind of things? Like, what's the story with those kind of situations?
Oh, she's 8 months now.
Oh, okay.
She was 2 months when I got the call to the UFC.
Wow.
So, 8 months now, and it's been pretty crazy watching her grow.
And does your wife or your girlfriend, like, who are they taking on the load of really doing all the baby related stuff when you're fighting and getting ready for camp? Because I know it's, especially the younger they are, the harder it can get. Do you have like a special person that's really taking up the load during camp for this?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously got to have a babysitter. Well, I have a babysitter that watches her every Saturday when I spar. But yeah, that's something new for this camp. We have to find a babysitter for fight week. So, but no, we got it all planned out. UFC gave me 9 weeks to figure it. So